So let me begin with you now, Anietie. In as much as Nigerians, we know that we have human rights and it is enshrined in Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution. How much do we really know what our rights are?
I think every Nigerian understands that we have human rights enshrined in our 1999 Constitution, but when it comes down to it, not many people know what the duties and obligations of government, that correspond to these rights are. And, we have a situation where accountability and that's been demanded by citizens it's not where it should be.
All right, Koyejo, let me come to you here in the studio. First, let me start with Eleanor Roosevelt's quote when it said, "Without concerted citizen action to uphold human rights, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, as the world celebrates the 70th anniversary of human rights since the Declaration of 1948, you remember this year's theme is upholding human rights, equality, justice, and all of that. Do you think, or does it seem feasible that after 70 years, equality, justice, and all of that could be realizable?
Well, I would say to a large extent it could be, but it's diverse. It depends on the nations. Some countries have gone much more ahead, while some are still lagging behind, while some are still struggling to entrench human rights in their concepts, in their principles. And that is the problem. If we look at the Western world, there are some countries that have actually been able to ensure that people, they respect human rights. So it is not been the same across board, while some are still struggling, especially in Africa, like the picture created about Nigeria. Then we talk about awareness. There's a lot of awareness now, a lot of reporting. So that makes it, it's not, I don't think, it might not be that it's on the increase, but there's a lot of awareness now. So people report more. So that could be the reason why we tend to think that it's increasing.
Now, Anietie, let me come to you now. Let's look at the situation where, the statistics of IDPs who are denied the human rights. What can you tell us about these ones and also those affected by violations from those who are meant to protect them?
The situation with internally displaced people in Nigeria is really unfortunate. It's obviously as a result of many crises that we have ongoing in different pockets of the country. In the northeast, we have the Boko Haram insurgency that has continued to rage, and you also have recurrent conflicts in the middle belt areas amongst communities, nomadic farmers and nomadic headsmen and in communal farming. And you have these numbers continuing to rise because of the failure of the states to ensure that there's security in these regions of the country. And the situation in these internally displaced camps are not what they should be as well. You have instances of sexual violence ongoing, especially as it affects women and girls. And there's a continuing failing of the government to ensure that there's accountability for, grievous human rights abuses ongoing in these internally displaced people's camps. It's a situation whereby these people are citizens of the country. They must be afforded the protection that they deserve, that is guaranteed to them under the Constitution and all other international and regional international human rights treaties that the country has ratified. There must be concerted efforts to ensure that these people are taken care of,
Right.
and that the security situation in their communities are addressed to ensure that they go back and live the sort of lives that they deserve.
All right. Now, let's come to you here in the studio. Nigeria is one of the countries to be probed by the United Nations vis-a-vis rights issues. We have the issue of, quite a number of issues raised by the United Nations, lack of obedience to court orders, you know, and all of that. We have the issue of Ex-Zakzaki, whom court has asked to be released, but is still
in
there.
detention.
And then we also have instances of brutality by the police. But what I want to ask is, let's look at the role of the press as well, vis-a-vis what happened in Abuja sometime last week, where a woman voluntarily, on her own volition, got to DSS office and then eventually what many condemned as abuse of her own right. The press, you know, focusing on her while she wanted to keep herself veiled, but the press eventually, you know, focused on her, and then how do you look at instances like that?
Right.
Is there a sense in which the press is also culpable?
Well, I believe the press must have been invited. The press will not just be in the DSS office. I believe they were invited by DSS to cover it. Now, human rights all over the world frown on trial by the press, trial by the public, because they are sequence, they are process through which if somebody is a suspect, you must go through investigation and trial. Now, parading suspects through the press, parading suspect is something that is not acceptable, actually. It's an abnormality that is being practiced.
So, but when such
which
cases
we don't.
happen, Lucas, what is the next line of action? Who sues who? What's the next line of action in that regard?
Well, the person that feel aggrieved might sue. It depends, especially if at the end of the day, it's found out that she's actually innocent, because it's the court that can pronounce you guilty. You are presumed guilty until the judge says you are guilty and sentence you. So if by now you are being tried by the DSS or police or whoever is doing the parading, then that is not, because you are taking upon yourself the duty of the court to conduct trial. It's the court that is supposed to conduct trial of any suspects, of any offense that you might have conducted.
So sorry for Ikechiku, but what's the next, what should be the ideal way in handling suspects? Say, for instance, now, you know, we have cases where police parade suspects and they say, okay, they caught this person to be, you know, he's a criminal and all of that. What is the ideal process for parading suspects? Is it that the media shouldn't take up such stories, or there should be a kind of veiling of these ones whenever they are being paraded before newsmen to be taken up for news items?
Yeah, if there's need to parade suspects at all, then their faces need to be covered. And there is no need for the press to go to them and be interviewing them, because this is a matter that they are just suspects. They have not been
Proven guilty.
proven guilty.
Right.
So you cannot say you cannot say categorically that they are guilty of the offense right there. They might have their own story to tell. So in that case, if you say that you want to parade any suspect at all, to know that, okay, you are walking, you need to cover their faces. You need to block the visage.
All right, let's now bring in Anietie in Abuja. Of course, well, quite a number of countries have been listed: Burma, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, North Korea, Libya, Sudan. Nigeria is also part of the countries. We have some of these statistics. Can you give us some of them, and what you think can be done so that we move away from human rights abuses to realize the theme, for instance, of this year, upholding human rights, justice, equality?
I think it's important for our authorities to not only pay lip service to the idea of human rights, but to ensure that the protection, promotion, and respect for human rights is at the helm of all of its activities. It is a good day for them to sit and reflect on whether or not human rights are actually attainable in Nigeria, whether or not the right standards have been attained and citizens can actually say that they enjoy human rights across board. There must be accountability for government's actions that serve to curtail human rights, and there must be actions taken towards protecting and fulfilling human rights across board. And citizens must also really start to assert themselves and assert their rights. It is important for them to not only understand what their human rights are, but understand what the corresponding duties and obligations of government are, in order for them to be able to demand accountability and demand respect of these rights. We see a situation where we have a budding social media activism. We've been able to achieve a lot just using hashtags and using citizen movements. An example is the investigation panel that has been set up into the abuses by the Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigerian Police Force. Activities like this and actions like this must be undertaken by citizens to ensure that we have a country that is rights respecting, that our institutions, that our state departments are towing the line of human rights. And human rights is at the heart of every activity that the government undertakes, whether or not is in our economic sphere or social interactions among citizens, as well as in the politics that we conduct, and in ensuring that citizens just enjoy the broad range of human rights that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights assures them of.
All right, Anietie Ewang, researcher, Human Rights Watch. I'd like to thank you very much, and also my guests in the studio, our guests in the studio, Lucas Koyejo, Zonal Coordinator, National Human Rights Commission. It's a pleasure to have your thoughts shared on TVC News Hour this time.